a late Friday night and I was just sitting at my desk playing chess on my laptop. Nothing serious, just one of this game where you tell yourself you'll stop after this round and then an hour goes by without you noticing. I had the difficulty turned up so I was fully locked in, leaning forward, squinting at the screen like that was somehow going to help me think better. At some point, my back started hurting, which was probably a sign I'd been sitting there way too long. But I ignored it. Eventually, the pot beat me. Just completely outplayed me. And I remember just sitting there like, yeah, I really just wasted almost an hour on that. Right after the match ended, an ad started playing. The site I use always has 2 ads back to back, so I didn't even bother watching. Some loud, colorful came with the princess asking me to solve puzzles and save her, the usual stuff. I just got up and went to pour myself a glass of orange juice. When I came back, the room felt quiet, like noticeably quiet. The second ad had started, but there was no sound. No music, no voiceover, nothing, and the screen looked completely different too. It wasn't bright or animated like the usual ads. It was dark, kind of tall, with these white pixelated letters flickering on the screen. And underneath the text, there was this small cloaked figure just standing there. The text said, "Find the monster in the room." At first, I thought it was just another one of those fake puzzle ads, but it actually looked kind of interesting. There wasn't a skip button either, so I figured I had to interact with it closely. So I clicked Begin. The first level was a pixelated bedroom. It looked almost fantasy-like, stone walls, candles, a canopy bed, that kind of thing. And right away I could see the monster in the corner. It was this cartoonish vampire and nothing scary at all. I clicked on it and it disappeared into a little puff animation and a message popped up saying I found the monster. Then it moved to the next level. A classroom this time, bright and colorful with drawings on the walls. The monster was just tiny gnome hiding under the desk, smiling. Again, not scary. I clicked it and it made this high-pitched sound and that was it. After a few levels, I realized I had actually mind playing it. It was simple, kind of relaxing, and honestly better than the usual ads. But then it started getting harder. The monsters weren't just out in the open anymore. They were half hidden behind things, or only visible in reflections, or blended into shadows. I actually had to focus this time. By around level 20, I was taking it seriously. The game even started giving tips like, pay attention to what doesn't belong, or monsters prefers corners. Then I hit a level that felt off. It showed a living room and a little girl sitting with her dad watching TV in the dark. I looked everywhere on the screen, every corner, every shadow, and I couldn't find anything. I even turned my brightness up thinking I was missing something. Eventually, I saw what looked like a part of lake under the couch. So I clicked it, and the screen flashed red. Wrong. Then a circle appeared around the dad, and text said he was the monster. That he had killed the mom and hidden her under the couch. I remember just leaning back for a second thinking, okay, that's darker than I expected. The next level was a bathroom. A grandma helping a kid get dressed. Again, I couldn't find anything, so I guessed and clicked on the grandma. Wrong game. This time the game pointed to the air vents, and when I looked closer, I saw a face inside it. Pale, bloated, way more realistic than everything else in the game. That part actually made me uncomfortable. After that, I started paying way more attention. Some levels I got right and some I didn't, but it kept getting harder. By level 28, I was staring at the screen for minutes trying to find anything that looked out of place. Eventually, I failed. Game over. There was a message that said something like, just because he can't see it doesn't mean it isn't there. And then the ad closed. I remember sitting there for a bit feeling kind of uneasy, but also thinking it was actually a really clever ad. Then I just went back to playing chess. The next night, I went out with some friends and came back pretty late. It was quiet, empty streets, the kind of night where everything feels a bit too still. As I was walking home, I noticed a figure standing in the distance. Just standing there in the middle of the road. I couldn't tell if it was facing me or not, but it looked slightly hunched and it was twitching. I just stopped for a second and thought, yeah, no. I turned and took a different route home, and I made it back fine. But that feeling of being watched stuck with me the whole night. The next day, I was back at my desk again, same routine, playing chess way too late, and around 2 a.m., the ad came back. Same style, same dot screen, but this time the text said, "Find the monster in the room before it finds you." It picked up from where I left off. There was a timer now. The early levels were easy again, but it didn't take long before it got difficult. Really difficult. At some point, I stopped thinking of them as monsters. They just looked like people. Situations like things that could actually happen. Eventually, I reached a level showing the front of a house. A one-story house. Everything looked normal at first, and I scanned the image over and over trying to find something wrong. Then I noticed in one of the windows there was a reflection, a silhouette. I actually smiled a bit thinking I finally got it. So I clicked on it, and the screen flashed red. Wrong. The message said, "That's the player." And then it highlighted to a different window. I couldn't see anything there. I leaned closer to the screen trying to make something out, and that's when I heard a noise behind me. Something in the kitchen, like something falling. I froze. I didn't move for a few seconds, just sat there listening. Then the game ended. I remember saying out loud, "Yeah, I'm done with this." But at the same time, I couldn't just ignore the noise. So I got up and went to check. And I know how it sounds, but I checked anyway. Kitchen was empty and nothing was out of place. I checked the rest of the house too, every room, and found nothing. Eventually, I went back to my bedroom, closed the door, and tried to sleep. And even though I checked everything, it didn't feel empty anymore. I'm parked under the harsh, buzzing lights of a 24-hour fuel station right now. All 4 doors are locked, engine still running, heater turned all the way up, and I still can't get my hands to stop shaking on the steering wheel. I'm a country law enforcement officer and I've only been on the job for about 2 years. But I've always been the type to follow protocol exactly, and I like rules. In this line of work, rules are what keep you in control. My patrol sector is a long empty stretch of highway. On one side there's nothing but dense forest, and on the other sides there's a steep drop into a huge lake. No houses, no street lights, no intersections for miles, just road, trees and water. I work the night shift, 10 to 6. Most nights are quiet, honestly, and you just drive, listen to the radio, maybe pull over the occasional driver. But tonight started like that too. Around 2:15 in the morning, I spotted a minivan a few miles ahead of me. It was moving slower than it should have been, and as I got closer, I could see it drifting slightly between lanes. Not aggressively, just enough to notice. That, combined with a broken tail light, was enough reason to pull it over. So I did everything by the book. Pulled in behind it, turned on my lights, wait for the driver to respond, and it took a while, but eventually they pulled over onto one of the shoulder, right near the drop-off by the lake. I parked, angled the cruiser properly, stepped out, and walked up. When I got to the back of the van, I placed my hand on the trunk like we're trained to do. I remember thinking it felt unusually cold, but I didn't think much of it at the time. I tapped on the driver's window, and when it rolled down, everything looked completely normal. There was a woman driving, looked exhausted. A man in the passenger seat, asleep. 2 kids in the back, also asleep under blankets. Just a family on a long trip. She apologized, said she'd been driving for hours and didn't realize how tired she was. I asked for a license and registration, and when she handed them to me, her hand brushed mine. And it was freezing. Not just cold, like actually freezing. I told her I'd run the information and be right back. And back in my cruiser, I called it in. Just a routine check, nothing unusual. While I was waiting, I glanced down at the dash cam monitor, just out of habit. And that's when everything stopped making sense. The van on the screen wasn't the van I had just walked away from. On the monitor, it looked like it had been pulled out of a lake. The roof was crushed in, the body covered in algae like it had been sitting underwater for years. And inside it were 4 bodies. Same positions, same people, but they were wrong. Bloated, rotting, their skin peeling away and eyes just empty. And all of them were staring straight into the camera, smiling. I remember looking up immediately straight through my windshield. The van in front of me looked completely normal. Still parked there, brake lights on, kids asleep in the back. Then I looked back down at the monitor. They had moved. The woman in the driver's seat had raised her hand and she was tapping on the glass from the inside. I couldn't hear it, but I could see it clearly on the screen. That's when a dispatch came back over the radio. They sounded confused, asked if I was sure about the plate number. Turns out those plates were linked to a missing family from 30 years ago. They were last seen near this exact area. The assumption was that they drove off into the lake, but the car was never found. I didn't even respond properly. I just sat there staring. When I finally looked up again, the van was gone. Not driving away, not fading to the distance, just gone. In its place there was this dark puddle on the gravel, like thick, stagnant water soaking into the ground. Then something hit my cruiser from the side, hard enough to shake the whole vehicle. Before I could react, the car started sliding, sideways, toward the edge of the embankment. I slammed the gas, but the tires couldn't get traction. When I looked to my right, I saw them, the family, but not the way they were before. They looked exactly like they did on the monitor, rotting, bloated, and they weren't standing on the ground. They were being held up by these massive black tentacle-like things coming out of the lake. The bodies were just attached to them like puppets, and they were pulling my cruiser towards the water. The passenger window shattered and one of those hands reached inside, grabbing onto the seat and pulling harder. At that point, my red tires was already going over the edge. I honestly thought that was it, so I just floored it. Everything in the car was screaming. Engine, tires, metal, and somehow the front wheels caught just enough grip. The cruiser jerked forward and I felt something give way behind me. I didn't stop. I even think. I just drove. When I finally looked in the mirror, I saw them being dragged back into the water like nothing ever happened. I drove straight here and I haven't left the car since. The window shattered, the doors dented in, and sitting on my passenger seat are 3 fingers, still covered in mud. I'm not going back to the station after this. If you're ever driving at night, especially near water, and you see a car drifting like that, just keep going. Don't stop. My dog Cookie is a high-energy Papillon mix with this big furry ears and long tufts of hair everywhere. And when I first adopted her, I almost gave her back. For the first 3 days, she just wouldn't stop crying. Now though, she's my baby. One thing that really helped with our energy and boredom was to talking buttons. You've probably seen them online. The ones where you record words like food or outside and dogs press them to communicate. Cookie has 20 of them. And yeah, sometimes she just presses random combinations that doesn't even make sense. She uses ouch for basically anything surprising, and I'm pretty sure she doesn't fully understand words like mad or sad or love you. But I'll be honest, on days when I'm stressed out, sitting on a couch and she presses love you, I choose to believe she knows what it means, even if she doesn't. For the most part though, she's actually pretty consistent with the important ones. Food, outside, stuff like that. Although I will say it's not fun being woken up in the middle of the night to her hitting food over and over again. Anyway, one night I woke up to the sound of my own voice coming from the living room. Just one word, stranger. Then I heard her little paws moving around and then, stranger outside. I'm not gonna lie, my heart definitely skipped. I just stayed in bed for a while, completely still, listening. I could hear her walking around the living room, nails stepping lightly on the floor, and after a bit, she pressed food a few times like nothing happened, then came back into the bedroom and curled up. The next morning, I checked outside, but there was nothing. No signs of anyone, no footprints, nothing. I even looked it up online later and found out a lot of people get freaked out when their pets use this stranger button. There are all these stories about it, so I just kind of laughed it off. And to be fair, Cookie had used it correctly before, and one time she had stranger and ran to the door, and it turned out to be the delivery driver. She was actually growling, which she almost never does. So I figured that night maybe she saw a raccoon or something outside. That explanation made sense, at least for a while. Then one day I came home from visiting my parents, and the moment we walked inside I could tell something was off with her. Her posture changed and she got really alert. I was still putting my things down when I heard, stranger, home. That didn't feel the same. I asked her, where? She just looked at me, then started walking around the house. Kitchen, hallway, bedroom like she was checking. Then she came back to the buttons and pressed, smell. That's when I actually felt it. That cold kind of uneasiness. Like, okay, what does that mean? I walked around the house myself, checked the doors and windows. Everything seemed to fine. No signs of anything, but it still bothered me. I realized I'd left the spare key outside under a flower pot, so I removed it that same day. And after noticing what looked like a footprint near one of the windows, I decided to install cameras too. After that, things went back to normal for a bit. Until about a week later, I was outside doing some gardening when my supervisor from work, Craig, happened to walk by. He said he was out jogging and asked if he could come in for some water. I didn't think much of it at the time, so I let him in. Cookie immediately didn't like it. Same reaction as before, low growling, tense posture, just watching him closely. I told her to go away and she did, but she kept her eyes on him the whole time. He was sitting in the living room making small talk, asking questions, when suddenly I heard, stranger, smell, from the buttons. That feeling came back instantly. Greg being there already felt off. It always been a little weird at work, nothing serious, just enough to make you uncomfortable. So hearing that, it didn't sit right with me. I made up an excuse, said I needed to take Cookie out and stepped outside. I called a friend and asked them to pretend there was an emergency so I had a reason to leave. Came back in, told Greg I had to go and waited until he left before going back inside. At the time I thought maybe I overreacted. But 2 days later the cameras proved I didn't. While I was out, Greg showed up at my house. He walked straight up to the front, looked around, and went directly to the float pot where I used to keep a spare key. That's when it really hit me. I changed the laws, got a security system installed, and told my neighbors and reported everything. He got fired not long after, and I blocked him when he started sending angry messages. That was weeks ago, and everything's been quiet since, until yesterday. Cookie pressed stranger again, and of course I reacted immediately. Asked her where. She spun in a circle, whining, then pressed home. I checked everything, every room, every camera, and nothing. I told her, no stranger. She just walked off, kind of sulking. Then today she pressed it again. Mad. Then, stranger. Mad. It didn't make sense. So I start overthinking it, trying to interpret it like people do. Maybe she was annoyed. Maybe I wasn't paying attention to her enough. But something about it still felt wrong. So I looked up Greg, just to be sure. His social media was full of angry posts, blaming me, saying I ruined his life. And then I found something else. An obituary. He died 2 days ago. And that's when I realized. Cookie didn't stop warning me. I just stopped understanding what she was trying to say.